As I watched those fireworks flare on the 4th, a different thought in my head had come forth. As we were all gathered for our independence, I thought, how'd it feel to have no dependence? I don't mean, however, how we are now free, but then when the people were in colonies, how it must have felt for those on the front line, and for those formulating this country's design. If I could go back to a point in the past, among a selection of choices real vast, I'd pick the time of our great revolution, among fighters and authors of our Constitution.
Request acknowledged. Please do not make any sudden movements as we travel back in time.
The grip of the British was growing too much, as the British were imposing taxes of such. And if we attempted to provide them our view, they tighten their power and make it more skewed.
We were merry in an undertone at the idea of making so large a cup of tea for the fishing. Joshua White.
The intolerable acts in response to the Tea Party could expect a response from the colonists not hardy. Reported the rebels had arms and ammunition. The British marched over to Concord on a mission. Reportedly to capture Adams and Hancock. They planned a small trip with less time on the clock, for Paul Revere got a whiff of the matter. He got on his horse to inform of the chatter. The British and rebels raced throughout the night and confront at Lexington at the sun's first sight.
Stand your ground. Don't fight unless fired upon. If they need to have a war, let it begin here. Captain John Buck.
A British officer demands to stand down. Confusion between the sides roam around. A fired shot. None know from who it was done. A skirmish starts. The revolution begun. 8 Minutemen died. 1 British officer wounded. And though it may seem that the chapter is concluded, to Concord the British resumed their trek. The chances of what happened next were a speck. The British arrive and destroy their weapons. You could say they completed their mission at essence. But militias from Concord and Lincoln were waiting. They engage in battle. The British retaliate. Delegates from the colonies 13 discuss to try and come up with what's best for us. The radicals were pushing for war against Britain. Conservatives, however, got something written. The Olive Branch petition was that written letter. Conservatives thought one last shot would be better. A final attempt at negotiations was sent, but peace with the colonies was not Britain's intent. Almost a year passes after the petition. The Continental Congress was on a new mission. After days of drafting, meeting, and planning, the Continental Congress finished their writing. I greatly do wish I was one of the signees, but 56 sign and the nation agrees. The Declaration of Independence states, "The United States hereby creates a separate entity, or state, if you may, and lists out problems they have with Britain's stay." This was, however, when the delegates thought about what would happen when the war would be fought. What type of government should be the one used, and how should we keep future tyranny fused? The 4th of July is our Independence Day thus. The date is all too familiar among us. But the sound of fireworks were not heard around, but the events that will follow will have a similar sound. After a few months of fierce debates, the Articles of Confederation were put into place. The separate colonies were now under one. The Constitution, as we know it, had not yet been done. The next 6 years of the Revolution were rough. The soldiers and generals made decisions that were tough. Those in Valley Forge were cold and hungry. Women take part in the fight for their country. More than 1,500 battles fought. The last battle's result was what any rebel group sought. The Battle of Yorktown in 1781. The British surrendered. America had won. 6,800 Americans killed. 6,100 Americans wounded. 17,000 die of disease. 20,000 taken prisoner, half of whom lost their lives. The war officially ended in 1783, with representatives signing the Paris Treaty. I admire all those who risked their lives for their country. The bravery of the soldiers, who even through harsh conditions battled. The women, who not only helped run camps and fundraisers, but those who were also brave and passionate enough to act as spies and disguised men to serve in direct combat. That type of bravery may be something I never acquired. The nation was freed from the hands of the crown. You would think that the nation would be rid of frowns. We bled, we fought, and the war had been won. But now, something else needed to be done. To protest against unjust policies and corruption, Daniel Shays' rebellion was causing much disruption. Thousands of veterans and farmers were led. By the end, 20 were wounded, 4 dead. Shays' rebellion was technically a flop, for it had been put to a hard stop. But it did get many officials to think. Were the Articles causing our country to sink? The Articles kept our government weak, but now many feel that we may need a tweak. A strong central government was what we did need. A convention is placed to help that idea proceed. 12 state delegates convene in 87 to revise and strengthen the Articles. The Articles, however, are torn. This is the chapter of how our Constitution was born. The articles were put so that the federal government doesn't become a future Great Britain to the nation, giving our government the inability to collect taxes or to regulate commerce. This wasn't good enough to run the young nation. The delegates discussed how the government should be set up. Bigger states were in favor of a population-based bicameral house offered through the Virginia Plan, while smaller states were in favor of an equal representation and unicameral house offered by the New Jersey Plan. The two were put together through the Connecticut Compromise, giving us the House of Representatives and the Senate, along with an executive branch. The problem of slaves' representation was also agreed upon through the 3/5 Compromise, meaning that for every 5 slaves, 3 would be given representation. The Constitution was drafted during the convention, but the real problem came with its ratification. 85 essays urging for the ratification of the drafted Constitution, known as the Federalist Papers, penned by John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, were written and appeared in New York newspapers between 1787 and 1788 to convince New York to send delegates who would ratify the Constitution, while opponents of the Constitution, in response, wrote the Anti-Federalist Papers. New York, however, refused to ratify unless the Bill of Rights, which is responsible for the many rights we enjoy today, would be amended into it. Nevertheless, by 1788, the minimum required 9 states ratified the Constitution, with the remaining 3 states ratifying it by 1790. The democracy set up and the rights provided by the United States is something I respect. It has given many individuals the freedom to live an uninterrupted life while providing for a safe environment. However, this is the moment I envy most. It's not every day that you get the opportunity to start and run a country from scratch. Those types of opportunities are rare, to say the least. That is why I admire and, given the choice, would go back to the time of the United States Revolution. The bravery of the people who fought and contributed is ample. The ideals put down by our founding fathers and the steps they took to make our country the way it is today is something I look up to and am very thankful for.
Please do not make any sudden movements as we travel forward